Stuck.
Enough of the hijinks.
Good morning, everyone. This is July the 21st, 2019. This is our Genie seminar. And as always, I indicate that by being on the meeting, you're giving your permission that this is could become a public recording. So be aware that anything you say could be public and just be so advised. We're continuing with, as we have been in the past, to try to identify what are the ways that we can make our world a better place. One of our main missions or purposes to see if we can find a way to make our world a happy, safe home for our loved ones. We've said in the past that the 4 qualities that would make a difference are help, acronym HELP: happiness, enough, love, and peace. Happiness, enough, love, and peace. If we can create these qualities, we would immediately make our world a much more livable, happy place for our loved ones. We are mainly, I think that we have an instinctive desire, and that probably the most important thing in our life is our loved ones. I say that because if something were to happen, that we were given information that one of our loved ones was in difficulty, there's probably nothing we would be doing that would be more important than paying whatever attention there was, and that would become the number one priority. But we've also suggested that in the past that somehow we've developed a way of thinking that doesn't put that as the highest priority. It's not so much our safety. We seem to be more involved with worshiping or idolizing the so-called the golden calf. That is money, fame, the material things that in life we seem to be preoccupied with as part of our language. Last time we introduced 2 new words. In our last meeting, we introduced the word trigger word and the second word, word switch. So we said that a trigger word these are new words for our language in our vocabulary, that a trigger word was any word or category of words that brought forth what was effective or worked in our history, in our past. Examples of trigger words, for example, would be our patriotic words and our political words, things that we've learned from our early history of what's appropriate, that are the collection of all the behaviors that we've inherited as part of our genetics. We've said that if we understand something about evolution, our history from past to present, we realize that our history is one of change. And we've gone from a period where we had no language. Actually, for 3.5 billion years, we've had virtually no language. And then just about 50,000 years ago, a blink of an eye, so to speak, in time, that we started to invent symbols and language. And then we created a different kind of way of processing information using words. And then we invented trigger words. So we had no words, no language, and then we invented words, and we invented those words that basically called forth whatever worked in our past history. And what worked in our past history was when we were somewhat tribal, was what seemed to be effective was if we could become part of a tribe, identify with a group, and then pledge our allegiance to that group and learn that we could be prepared to fight and even die for that tribe, and so our language became very tribal. That is, we invented words that identified us and them, the good people, which was our tribe, and those that were antagonistic to our tribe, those who were negative, who basically wanted our cave. They wanted whatever we had, whatever our belongings were. They would take our weapons and they would have better weapons and so on. So we invented a new kind of language, and those were the tribal words that became part of our vocabulary. So think of all the words we have for our various countries, the flags we have, those symbols, how many words we have for our political symbols, and how many religious symbols we have. So those were tribal words. Now we've ended, and we introduced this other word, which we've called a word switch. And what is the word switch? Is a new word. A word switch is a word that instead of identifying what was effective in our past, it identifies what we can use to consider a new story in our imagination and consider what is important from past to present to the future, from then to here to now. So we can create new stories that talk about us as both and rather than either or. So you realize we have a new word switch as well. We've talked about our 7-word switches, and one of the important ones was we switched from either or our language to the new word both and, which sees us as connected, as identical. So what I'd like to do now is a little exercise using our imagination, and I'd like you to participate, if you will, in a bit of imagination. So imagine, if you will, that you were from a very advanced society, a very advanced outer universe, somewhere way off in the past, away from us, a very advanced society where you were created as a clone. So you were an identical group. You were cloned and you were identical to each other, but you were very advanced and you were actually sent on a spaceship. You came as a group with a mission to come to Earth and study Earth and see what is this place where people and the situations seem to be different. They're different than us, and you're here to study things. And your job is to report back to your senior leader what is it that you've identified when you've come to this world here and studied things. And what you were asked first to identify was vehicles. So you were shown 4 different kinds of vehicles. You were shown a bus, and you were shown a tractor, and you were shown a Ferrari, a very swift-looking automobile, and let's see what else. And you were shown a bulldozer. You were shown those different vehicles, and then you were asked to come back and report what did you observe. How would you describe those? What you saw? How would you describe to someone who had not seen them? You've seen them, and now you're going to describe what are the characteristics that identify what you've just seen. I'll be the taker of the report for you. What is it? How would you describe those different 4 vehicles?
Well, one by size, one seemed quite massive, others seemed very small.
I would report back that the tractor and the bulldozer are tools for advancing. They were innovative and able to model the society and advance the society. The Ferrari, they would be bewildered to know what waste and vanity pervaded the society. And the bus, they would say a form of transportation to move people from one place to another, which made sense. So they could probably relate to 3 out of the 4, except the Ferrari would be, a duck out of water in their society if it were advanced as a society. Let me stop there, just get to comments.
I would disagree with you, John. I think the Ferrari would represent beauty, taking something functional and making something beautiful out of it instead of just a bulldozer, which is functional but doesn't look particularly great.
Yeah, well, they're advanced, so they know how to build societies, right? And so the Ferrari, in my opinion, is a very wasteful and vain thing. And beauty is in the eye of the beholder. They may see the bulldozer and the tractor as beauty, as innovative things to build.
Maybe
I
they would see the vehicles as built for conveyance and some built for industry, and they might very well see the Ferrari as a vehicle built for speed rather than beauty, as opposed to the other vehicles where speed isn't as important as the functionality of the vehicle.
Okay, my
That's a
question
good point, too.
would be, what are you, great leader Don Pett, what are you asking? Why are you asking?
Why am I asking?
I can hardly hear you, Josephine.
Yeah,
Let me stop the video. Sometimes when I stop the video, is that better?
that is better.
Yeah, it's the video. I would wonder, why are you asking? I mean, what kind of, what is your motivation for asking that question?
I will reveal that in just a few minutes.
Yeah, you're giving away. He would be giving away why he asked in the first place.
Well, I'm saying that because depending on the question is how I would respond. You know, if not, then I'm just shooting in the dark.
Well, look, you're on a mission right now. You're out of contact with you're out way away from your home base now, and you're just being asked if you can describe what you've just seen and bring back the information.
Oh, so it's just a description. Okay, so you just want a description.
I
Okay.
want you to, what is your job is, you don't understand what you're seeing in this new world here that's different from where you've all been cloned to be identical the same, and now you're trying to study this group and find out something about them and bring back what is it that you've just seen.
Well, okay, then I think if I'm in a society where everything is cloned, it's not just the people, it's probably the housing and the clothes and the culture and the language and everything. The first thing I'm going to talk about in the societies, well, I'm going to describe all of the differences between, all of the, if we're talking about vehicles, just describe all the differences between the vehicles.
Okay. So people have just talked about the difference between beauty and functionality and so on. Anything else we would bring back to describe about what you've just seen? Is that pretty much the list that you'd be report? I am the chief recipient of your information here. Do you have anything else to tell me about what you've just seen?
I actually misunderstood your question earlier. Now it is more clear to me. And if the report is if they have not seen the vehicle earlier and this is the first time they are seeing such vehicles, then there might be some, because with everything new, our animal instincts really take over. So there will be a threat perception attached to each of those vehicles, like a bulldozer or a Ferrari, which makes more sound, will have more threat perception than the other vehicles.
They all require gasoline or some external substance to really move.
Ah.
Well, I think I might just started to describe with the similarities. Now that I think about it, I mean, the four different things, I would describe because I'm accustomed to similarities. So my perspective.
Okay, you're accustomed to similarities, but others have talked about the differences.
Well, I'm saying I come from a planet of similarities, so I'd probably start from that perspective of similarities, that they have mostly four wheels, they have people that drive them, they have steering wheels, they have combustible engines. So I would probably start with the similarities and then talk about whatever the differences are.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm going to move on a little bit. Now you're sent back. I've heard your answers now. Thank you for your exploratory visit. Now I would like you to go, and they have humans on that planet. I'd like you to go and look at the humans this time and come back and tell me what you found out about humans.
Well, the first thing they would notice is that there's this one human, his name's John Rosado, is the most handsome creature.
They'll come back, there's King John, and then there's everybody else.
The humans are all pretty much the same type of organism, but there are wild differences in all of them, and none of them get along.
Some of them.
Right, the tribal nature. I was going to go there with the tribal nature of the humans and how they destroy each other, and that it's amazing how different they are, and their difference makes them attack each other.
See, I'm
The
starting to
differences are the problem.
I'm starting.
Good.
I have
Sorry.
no idea why these guys are so similar. I have no idea what these guys think about as difference. You know, because it's like when I think about why different countries are warring, and then and you listen to some of the reasons why they're fighting. It's like, it sounds so simple. Why don't they just solve it? So as coming from another planet, I would probably observe that, and I would just, you know, I would be very curious about why they think they're so different.
I think my observation would be that there, you know, if you could see things on a global level, you would see that there are certain places where things are much more developed and sophisticated, and other areas where things were much more backwards.
Yeah, I think that's a really good one, Avi, is that you know, when they looked at the vehicles, they could have looked at the functionality, but it mirrored. I think our vehicles mirror our people.
Mm-hmm.
In that Ferraris are, are vain, and bulldozers may be ugly, but they're very functional. And buses are very efficient, and they move many more people around. And so you could take a look at vehicles and then model the human traits that go along with them.
I'm chuckling just because I know John is a car maven. John knows everything there is to know about cars, and the idea he's coming down so negatively on Ferrari is a complete shock to me.
Well, you know, you could get a Tesla, and the Tesla is actually faster than a Ferrari. So there you go.
As I stated.
Well, we can all be very grateful that they didn't observe perhaps a Vega, or they would obliterate the planet. That would be the next move.
What else would you say about people now? Let's get after. We got back from the vehicles. And what about people here? This is a study now that your assignment is to look at people, and what do you have as a report about what you observe?
Combative.
You observe that everybody's got 2 arms and 2 legs. Observe that some people can't use them and have mechanical assistance. Different colors, different color eyes, different color skin. And you can really look at people. You could classify them if you're a clone, that there are lots of differences. If you're a clone, you're used to looking at somebody who looks exactly like you. Whereas here, there are lots of differences, some subtle, some not so subtle. And I guess wonder.
Yeah, I agree there. I agree there. It goes to where Josephine was going before, was the similarities. But then if you go to behaviors, that's where things get much different. But if you just look at where Josephine was going, you went, Marilyn, which was, what are the similarities? Both have arms, legs, eyes, dress different. But if you look at behaviors, I think that's where the major differences, where their report would be wildly different.
I think it would be the same as if we're looking at, it's just observable humans, not scientists, looking at a colony of ants. We're not going to see color differences or, height differences, or, it would be in behavior, and see which ones are the worker ants and which ones might be the queen bee or whatever. That stuff you might observe because they're all working towards a society. So I don't know if we would be able to observe many differences. I'm not sure.
No, one thing which I'm trying to by listening to everyone, I'm trying to realize here is all of us or anyone in that situation, they will they will perceive what they see because all of them are seeing the same thing. They will perceive what they are seeing based on their own way of thinking. It's not how what they are observing, it's what they think that they're observing, and that will in turn impact what they report back. So somebody like somebody who is extremely positive, they will give positive things. Somebody who is highly scientific, they will get those scientific things. Somebody who thinks that there is no bright future for their world, they might go and say there is nothing good there as other in the other planet as well. So it's not what is actually happening, but it's what the individuals perceive and their own notions. The AAA formula that you gave us, assumptions that we have, which will in turn uh, uh, be the action.
Are there anything with people, Marilyn started it with the idea that most people are very much alike. And Josephine, I think, brought up the question that most cars have a lot of things that are alike. We all have, and I think also the idea that cars have similar things. And you pointed out there were some differences in automobiles, but for the base part, they're mostly similar. They all have engines, they all have steering wheels, they all have wheels, they all have a place to sit. They're basically, if you look at it, they're much more alike than they are different. They are differences, but they have certainly many more similarities than differences. Now, what about people? How are they different? Most people, you say, have two arms, they have two eyes, they have legs, they have a heart, they have a lot of things that are similar. How are we different? What's the most obvious? Maybe it's not so obvious.
Oh, we're different in the way we're raised and the early influences that come on us.
Well, we're all raised by getting information. We're all born with a certain amount of genetic inheritance, and we're all born by being fed with certain. We're told stories. We're all told stories from the time we're born until we grow up, and we're all basically taught words, basically. But is there any area where we're clearly have something different and different than these clone people who come down and visit us? They're checking us out.
Not them. Right? We're not them. So
Are y'all stumped?
we think we're individuals, right? We think, everyone in the United States is somehow different than a different country. Say, I'm just going to pick on a country, right? China. And everyone in China is this way, X, Y, and Z. But everyone in the United States is different, right? We all have our own opinions, and we're all different colors. We have different whatever classes, but they're all homogeneous. And somehow our individualism and somehow the way we live makes us better. And we do that with a lot of different cultures, right? We call them primitive or whatever. But I think the same thing from an outer space creature come into this world and looking at us. I think it's going to be the same thing. They would look at us as a homogeneous group, and they would describe us however they want to describe us, but they would, I think, see themselves as the different and individuals.
Okay.
Well, from a long view, yeah, I agree with Josephine. That's what they would see. They would see us as homogeneous individuals, and a cursory overview to examine more specifically and minutely. They would see that we don't behave that way.
Well, I'll come back. I'll answer Josephine's original question. Why am I asking you this exercise?
That's all of our question.
What is, is there something behind this? Is this just academic exercise. It seems to me that what I'm trying to convey to you is it's so easy to look at our differences rather than our similarities. There are many more similarities that we're alike than different. If you look at people, one of the areas that you seems to have totally neglected that is very different from these cloned people is that we fuck. We have intercourse. You know, we reproduce differently than they do. But for the most part, there are far more many similarities in what we do. Our behaviors, yes, we do fight one another, and some of us don't. We learn pretty much the same way. We learn by trial and error. We have the same kinds of, we all have hearts. We all have the same kind of organisms. When we look at automobiles, if you look at automobiles and you were to describe them, it seems to me one of the things that is most common is that what's common in automobiles, we all have similar kinds of things, but somewhere along the line, we all started similar. We all started sexually. We were clones similar. You know, we started in our history as a single cell that divided by dividing into our identical self. We became identical cells as part of our history. And then we changed a little bit. We began to have a little variation, and then we developed a different kind of behavior, to be appearance, that we had offspring that were different, and we developed families. And then families became families of families, and we became tribes. And then tribes became tribes of tribes, and we became countries. We became political parties and so on. So would it be helpful if this expedition not only came and looked at the moment in time, but they also had the ability to understand they came for a long time and they knew just what they saw at that moment, but they saw something of our past as well. So if they knew our history, we realized that most of our history, we were not humans at all. We had 3.5 billion years. We had at least 2.5 billion years before we had animals. And then humans basically didn't come along very much late in that 3.5 billion year history. Humans, supposedly, as we understand them, Homo sapiens and higher levels, if we consider a higher level, that we're only about 15,000 years old, as opposed to being 3.5 billion years. We're really a blink in time in our history. But if we were to be able to look at and have a fairly objective, one of the things we'd see about automobiles is there's so much more similarities than differences. You know, somebody said to me when I said, what do you think about the difference between the cars? And as a response was, it doesn't matter, they're all alike. They all get you to where you want to go. You get in and they drive you, and that's where they are. That's what they basically do. Some may have more chrome, some may have a little more pizzazz to them, they may have more horsepower, but basically there's much more alike about them. So what I'm really just trying to bring up this exercise is to point out that we are so much more tuned in to our slight differences. As human beings, if we were to study people, we're so much more alike. But one of the main differences that we've talked about in the last meeting is that we reproduce differently. We were at one time in our history both masculine and feminine. We had estrogens and androgens in our history, and we reproduced within one organism. And then in the course of our history, what we've evolved to is we still have estrogens and androgens. We still have masculine and feminine energy in all of us. Males have estrogens, females have androgens. And so for the most part, we're alike. But what's clearly different is that males, as we've said, make millions of seed a day. The smallest amount in my studies are 20 million seed a day, and other studies say that we make 390 million seeds every day, and that the elephant makes 7 billion seeds in one ejaculation. So I mean, there are differences, of course, but males clearly have some different way of reproduction that has to do with creating seeds and having muscle and competing for harem rights And females are different in that females make no eggs. They're born with a certain number of eggs. And females have a different set of qualities about them. Females basically are, as part of just not having, just having more estrogen. So more estrogen gives us more ability to be nurturing. It's quite clear that females pretty much have been given the duty of creating life over a 9-month period. And for the most part, what we observe is they spend most of their life, or their early life, nurturing the offspring. The female is much more likely to realize that when she takes the male seed, she's taking an obligation on for probably at least 20 years. She's taking the obligation on for 9 months, and then for another several periods of time until that offspring can able to be off on their own, which is generally in our society about 18 or 20 years. Maybe if you want to go early, at the age of maybe 12 or 13, when we start to menstruate and have the ability to reproduce. But for the most part, we're not ready to go on and take responsibility to ourselves till much later in life. So I'm just pointing this out because we go back to our words. We inherit a language that basically helps us to look at what was so in the past and understand something about our past. If these people from the outer space come and observe us, if they could know something about our history and where we were for 3.5 billion years, and this slight change now where for the last 15,000 years we've become humans, that we've been pretty much alike, but we've differentiated into the different kinds of sexes. And we've said that the new words for those two sexes, if we were more accurate, would be a he, she, and a she, he. That at least the words he, she says that we have both male and female energy, and she, he says we have female and male energy, but there's only a slight difference, but basically we're more alike. And the point I'm trying to make is that many people now, and certainly in the spiritual movement, are making, so we're becoming aware that we're more alike than different. But our history, if we look at our history, we realize that we have developed a language. We've developed trigger words when we finally developed language that separate us into two categories. So when we invented words, we didn't invent words that are accurate, that say we're he, she's, and she, he's. We invented words that see us as totally separate individuals, as males and females, as though we're totally different. And what Einstein now, I think the message I'm trying to convey to you is saying that the way we think is the reason why we have wars. The way we think is the reason why we have virtually all of our problems. The way we think is because we've divided ourselves into us and them, either or. We've created an either or vocabulary and language of tribal words. Our language basically causes us to think in terms of two categories: us and them, good or bad, right or wrong. And our symbols now are a series of symbols that express that basic way of thinking. We're either American, or we're Jewish, or we're Catholic, or we're a Democrat or a Republican. And all of these tell us that we're part of our tribe, and our behavior is directed to be in an antagonistic relationship with other tribes. So now what Einstein, I think, is telling us, we need to create words. We need to create a newer way of thinking where we process information to both and rather than either or, to realize we are more alike than differences. And if we were more alike, Einstein's message was, until we can teach ourselves to cooperate and work together, it's only a matter of time before, now that we create weapons of ultimate destructive power, that we'll use these weapons. And the point that I've been trying to make, and I know it's difficult once we're so addicted or habituated to think in terms of two categories, is that when we look at our history, we learn from our history, we learn from evolution, that when males and females were made as different genders, instead of being together in one, the masculine energy favored something very quick. You have seeds and you go ahead and plant your seeds one after the other, and you're basically interested in what's good for me for here and now, and that you have the muscle and the power to dominate. Females, on the other hand, have been either privileged or burdened, which way you look at it, with the task of having and nurturing new life. Of females have almost, you can say it instinctively, or through their DNA, inherit the awareness that when they accept the seed, they're taking on a task that's going to be probably for at least 9 months and much longer than that. So here we have males begin to get power, muscles, power, and women get, I'd say, just not only love, but also wisdom. The idea, wisdom is the ability to think in terms of past, present to future, and think in terms of long term. So I think we recognize now, yes, there are differences, but we're more similar. And the question is, why is it then we come and we look and as aliens and we come and look and we see, why are these people acting so crazy? They kill one another. They spend their time making more weapons. They use their energy, their creative energy, making more weapons of destructive power to kill and maim other people and maim other tribes. And all of a sudden, as an invader from outer space, you see these people are acting kind of insane. But when we look at it, we say, this was not insane at all from our past. Our past, it was normal that we had to be part of a tribe. It was normal we had to have more muscle. We had to protect ourselves. And the words we created were words that were suitable for our primitive ancestors. You know, when our ancestors were in their caves, what do you think their language consisted of? Did their language consist of our life hereafter, or did they consist of what were the stories, in other words, that our ancestors created about ourselves? Can you think of the early stories that we finally created?
Watch out for those big dinosaurs.
That was one of them. But even before the dinosaurs, I mean, how would they explain thunder and lightning? If you were a cave person or a very primitive person, you had hardly any language, how would you explain lightning and thunder and death and life and death and the sun and the moon? What would the stories you come up with with limited language?
I think you're talking about the origin of religion.
You create gods then, right? You start worshiping trees or gods or the sun. And so what happened in our history, so we made stories up and we began to worship different kinds of God. We created all kinds of gods. We had, I mean, the golden calf was an example. You know, we created all kinds of rituals to pray to God and please Him, and we invented prayer, bargaining. You know,
you bet.
Then we invented. So we basically invented magical stories. So our early stories were ones of magic and superstition. And then finally, what happened in the stories? We created multiple gods, and then in our history, we took our multiple gods with multiple stories. Think about how many Greek gods there are in the Greek religion and the Indian religion,
Yes.
and so on, how many gods there are and how many different stories for every one of the gods. And then long came a guy by the name of Abraham, right? And what did Abraham say?
77 years ago.
That's the wrong guy.
Oh, wrong Abraham. I'm sorry. I was moving forward.
Yeah, the older guy, the great grandfather of Lincoln. What was that? What did he tell us? He told us there's one God, right? He said, forget about all these other gods. There's one God, and if you all want to keep telling us there's one God, we refuse to bow down to you. But your gods are all superstitious gods, and it's only the one God that's the God of everything. And so people didn't like that. They didn't like to come out of the comfort zone and say, you're crazy. We've got all our gods, and you keep your one God. We have more gods than you got, so we're more powerful than you are with one God. So we had one God. And then we had magical stories about the one God, didn't we?
Well, there's no question that monotheism was a tough sell.
Yeah, it seemed to be it. And then, so then we had monotheism, and then we made stories about our one God. What are the stories we made about the one God?
Well, first he was vengeful and terrifying, and then he became loving and wonderful.
And then there's a bad guy too, right?
Oh yes, yes, because you can't have God without the inverse of God, which is the big D, way down.
Okay, so now and that's one of the base stories that we've been carrying around with us. And then Einstein came along and he said, I don't believe in those gods. And so other people also said they don't believe in those gods. You know, we had people like, who was it, Hitchens and other people who said, these stories are ones that we shouldn't believe everything about these gods. There must be a different way of looking at it. And Einstein said, well, my God is the God who created an orderly universe. Einstein didn't say he was an atheist. He said, I said, I believe in an orderly universe. Whoever that creator was, we don't know who that original person was. It's too far behind. We don't have the ability to understand that. But I can understand that whoever that was, he did create an orderly universe. And that's what I believe in. I believe in sort of in the scientific method. You know, if we understand something about cause and effect, we understand our scientific method, which we're capable of doing. That's the God I believe in, even though it's the God I don't understand, but at least I believe in science. I believe there's an orderly universe. And if I understand something about that orderly universe, then I can predict the future.
You know, once I sorry, go ahead.
You make this sound like a progression, and I'm not sure it is a progression. I think it's different. A lot of people still believe in multiple gods, and a lot of people do a lot of things. So it's, I think you're describing your journey, but I'm not sure you're describing everybody's journey or the correct journey. It's one approach.
The other thing I would say, Don, is I mean, I agree with you, Marilyn. I was listening with that kind of ear. Wasn't there always in all of these religions one uber god, like be it Ra or the sun or maybe Ganesh? So there was always an uber, even Zeus, right? There was always one uber god, and then there were these, if you want to call them saints or prophets or, you know, minor gods or, you know, gods with lesser powers, if you want, and you small g compared to big G. So what I do think, you know, with the um, ascent of Judeo-Christian religion, it was a good narrative, right? It kind of took the narrative to a different level of worshiping, you know, don't worship all the minor gods, just worship the uber god, right? But I think in all these religions across time, there's always been this one big master of the universe, if you will, in all of our worship. The only other thing, and we had this conversation about male females, I think it was a good narrative too to give the male, you know, and I don't know why women accepted this, that somehow the role we played, you know, in society was somehow minor because we didn't have the stronger fists or the, you know, the physical might that we had to get overpowered, that somehow the qualities we possessed were somehow minor as opposed to being viewed as equal. And I think that was another byproduct of thinking about gods being male as opposed to both male and female somehow. So that's my thought. I think it's in relation to, similar to what Marilyn was saying, in how the interpretation it is very much your journey. I think there's a lot to what you're saying, and I think people can understand what you're saying, but not necessarily agree with everything. That's all.
Well, you know, and Josephine, you make a great point, and I think it boils down to the fact that as far as the perception of women in the role of society, at the dawn of time, if we want to go back that far, is simply a primitive notion. Nobody knew any better. It was just dumb. But that's the way it shaped out. They were going with what they could perceive and see. Don, your example reminds me so much of a wonderful science fiction film, which is really highly literate in its concept, and that was The Day the Earth Stood Still, where we're visited by a very urbane extraterrestrial who says, look, you know, I'm from a monitoring agency in the universe, and we've been watching you, and we're fed up. And unless you stop with the amassing of the destructive weapons, you're going to upset the order of the universe, and that's where we come in. We'll obliterate you. So this is your last warning. And instead of, and the great scientists and political figures of the world are present and privy to this address, and the response to it is, well, we better get the military and kick the shit out of these people and get them out of here. And so the message, the message was not heeded as the extraterrestrial had hoped. But it's really kind of interesting. It's what you're talking about is the observance of how these creatures on this planet operate and how it would be perceived by a more sophisticated and advanced species. It made me think of the movie.
It's a brilliant movie. Now, one thing is, it's not. See, I come from a country where, you know, you will not believe a cow is born with 5 legs. Like one leg, it's an abnormality hanging off its side, and then it becomes the source of all you know, income for a man who takes that cow around, and people say, oh wow, this is a great god cow, let me give money to that cow. And then I come from a country where if a cow is sitting in the middle of the road, all the vehicles will go around it. They will not a cow can do whatever it wants, nobody will do anything. But then if you see on the other side what it has done, you know, this worship of cow, what it has done is, India has one of the largest populations of cow, so as a domestic animal, you know. Similarly, I wish we had stuck with this. We really prayed a lot of trees, but then somehow, you know, after the British came, we stopped doing that. But when you pray something or when you respect something, then you don't misuse it. So we had lot of things which I think our ancestors did it. Like our society stood for probably 10,000 years. I'm sure if they were dumb, the society would not. This is probably, at least for me, India is probably the only continuing society without any major change in demography for past 10,000, 15,000 years. So what that tells me is that these guys may not be able to explain everything. Like even science today cannot explain everything, but they knew what they were doing, and whatever they thought is important to the society, they converted it to a god. In hindsight, that is how I look at it. They may have done something very different, but the cow, the tree, the sun, the moon, the environment around us, everything is something we pray for. All our festivals, unlike here, are all related to, you know, farm output festival, milk output festival. All festivals are also one unique thing which I think, maybe somebody can correct me, which I have not seen, is in Indian mythology, is probably the only mythology where women got a lot of prominence as goddesses. So the god of money is a woman, the god of education is a woman, the god of what else? Power is a woman. So we have a god of power who is a woman, not a man. And so, but somehow, you know, the society forgot it, and then we came back to where, you know, like every other male dominated society, which really ruined and did not give the woman that prominence which our ancestors gave. So I look at it as a story for a different culture than what you have perceived, and what you have perceived is not right or not wrong. It is how you or you know, your teachers perceived it, or a society that you belong to perceived it. We have our own story. But then all these stories at the end of the day are neither right nor wrong. Similarly, science, which all of us believe in, is more wrong than most. There have been so many theories which are continuously proven wrong, one after the other. Similarly, there are equally different number of stories which are proven right, or scientific experiments, or all those things are proven right. So nothing is right or wrong. It's just how we perceive it and what works in that era.
Yeah, I look at religion as being the thing that controls people. I mean, you know, in the end, all religion is designed to control a group of people,
Your voice is
and
breaking, John.
whatever story.
Once in a while, your voice is.
Can you hear me now? Okay, let me turn off my video.
Turn off your picture.
Also. Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yeah.
better.
Okay, great. So I look at religion, all religions, as you know, looking to control people, right, in one way or another. Governments, religion, organizations, they're there to end up, you know, hurting the masses in a direction. Most religions herd the masses in a very good direction. And therefore religion's not bad when you come at it from that perspective. But you know, so whatever story you come up with, or that humans come up with to then herd the cats in a given direction, is really what I look at religion as being about. I was, you know, I've been a Catholic all my life, but I don't necessarily prescribe to be a very religious person. I definitely am a spiritual person, in that I believe in karma, and I believe in what comes around goes around. And and in the end, being a good person is going to serve you well in the end. But I do believe that changing the tenor of our politics, because I believe politics have become our religion, and especially in the United States. And I think if we don't change that and move that back to a way, and I think Don's way is a very good way of changing the way we think. The eventuality is not good. The direction that people are going is not good. I'll stop there.
There's a very strong anti-religious wave in American politics today.
Right, and I think that is a contribution to the divisiveness that we see in politics.
Have you noticed when you talk
more were more? Go ahead.
I'm just saying, it's interesting. Have you noticed how many people you talk to whenever this subject arises in day-to-day interactions and communications? How many people will tell you that they have a fundamental religious rooting, be it Christian, Jewish, whatever, but they don't practice as much? They love to tell you, well, you know, I was born Catholic and raised Catholic, but I don't practice it all that much, and I'm not that strong about it. I don't practice, and I hear that more and more and more and more.
Just like what I said.
I think over the years, over the centuries, to me, the origin of religion was the first law, and it was to get barbarism under control. You know, you stole a chicken from my yard, I'll cut your head off, and this kind of thing. There had to be some sort of regulating force, and for that, we had to have people telling us that there's something bigger than us, and if you don't watch out, terrible things will happen to you. And then from there it evolved. But I think as you know, we've come of age, quote unquote, in some ways we've never come of age. I think as Don points out to us every week, that has worn away, and people are very different, and they turn away from religion more than turn toward it nowadays. Organized religion, I mean. Faith is a different thing.
So I just heard Sharath and John, and many people are taking advantage of the.
Your voice is not clear, Basu.
some of, like some people are taking advantage of the religious sentiments to for their own benefit, especially politicians. So what Sharath said, that the cow is given a lot of importance. Actually, there are some states where the education budget and healthcare budget is probably less than the cow protection budget. And some times we are seeing that human beings are getting killed for some protecting animals, which is fine, but as long as it's a genuine issue. So there are political parties that take advantage of these situations. Basically, they're taking advantage of religious sentiments and doing something illegal as such, actually.
You know what, again, this is another perception. I don't want to go into a back and forth, but what happens is, for those of us who are just because this cow topic is a very big topic back in India, for some of us who work in different industries, we have another source of income. But having a cow for a poor man at his home is like his entire life. The cow gives milk, it gives a lot of things to that person. And if that cow is taken, it is as if somebody is getting into your house. It is as big a threat to someone, like some breaking and entering here. So if somebody breaks and enters your home, here you're allowed to shoot them, right? It's same as like that there.
No. See, Sharath, there is also a profession. There was also business profession.
Yeah,
so those people have lost their profession. So it's obviously a balance that needs to be there, because people are also exporting it.
Yeah, absolutely right. So, but then what happens is, Pasu is right in one thing, is that with anywhere, if you see, there are a lot of miscreants in the society who try to misuse normal known norms of to just start creating problems in the society. That is what we have to be careful about. But anyway, that was a digression. I know.
Well, one of the differences in terms of scientific method, and I think all religions, you stay with it because it gives you something. It gives you a community, it gives you a menu for holidays, it gives you friends, commonalities. But one of the things that if you look at science, and not necessarily to replace religion, but Sharad mentions that how science fails because so many things aren't the way they are supposed to be, or you believe it for a while and then a new theory comes up. But I think that's the real importance of science, that you don't have certain precepts that are frozen in stone, that it allows you to change things as in some ways as circumstances come up. So you can take a concept that you once thought was for sure, like DNA passes through genes, it doesn't pass because your environment is different. I mean, that's really different from what I grew up believing. But if you can prove it, then it changes the world. So I don't think it has to replace a belief, but it certainly can add to it in positive ways.
Yes, precisely. So that is what I think all of us are coming to. So we don't, just because something scientific has been proven, we don't need to go and discard or demean a myth in a sense, because after all, I'm trying to, so whatever the Indian gods are, or even there are so many videos that there was no Muhammad, there was no Jesus, so there are a lot of these things which are myths. And what is a myth? Myth is a perception of truth by a large number of people. It is someone's truth. It may not be the truth, but it will be someone's truth, right? So we don't need to discard all these other stories just because there is this new story. What the new story can do is, it can help us understand why people in a certain era created these other stories because of their limited knowledge. Now we know the speed of light, right? But then according to Newton, who was the smartest person in his era, speed of light was completely different because he had a different theory. But that doesn't mean that what Newton did can completely be discarded. His theory of how electromagnetic wave travels through air or through the universe did allow science to move to the next level of step. If Newton had not done what he had done, maybe the next guy who proved, and finally the electromagnetic theory which Einstein brought in, they would not have happened. So everything, all these older stories, somehow together, they created a groundwork for this new story to come in. So we cannot discard them, or I think ideally we should not discard them. We should just think them in the correct perspective. Like, okay, that was a story. Our ancestors created them. They had limited understanding. We have different level of understanding. So maybe they said that if somebody eats beef, you murder them. But that was because the society was dependent on cow. Now you don't murder them. You probably create a law if you want society to not eat beef. That's how we have to look at it, rather than the way, like in some religious text it is written, right? If you eat red meat, then your hand should be chopped off or something, or whatever those things are.
I don't know. I would stay out of the Outback Steakhouse if I were you. I think.
No. I think this is a very smart Indian politician. He's a very intelligent man. He said that you can eat American beef if you want to. That's a different scientific species than the Indian cow.
Good. I feel better about that. Because I had a burger the other day, and I don't want to feel I was eating a deity.
No, you don't have access to the deity. It is back in India.
I'm very comfortable that way. Thank you.
Talking about making it up as you go along,
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right.
American cows. You know how racist that is? You know how racist that sounds? Oh, because I'm an American cow. I'm an American cow, I don't count. But if I'm an Indian cow, it makes me a cut above.
No. I think you're misunderstanding. What I'm saying.
No pun intended.
No. What I'm saying is, if I'm an American cow, it is the responsibility of an American to actually pray me and then save me. If I'm an Indian cow, it is the responsibility of an Indian to save him.
Yeah. Sure.
Next time you go to McDonald's, make sure you ask whether their cow was an Indian or American cow.
Yes,
Cows
exactly.
can also get passport now.
Yeah, forget about organic or not. We gotta ask: is it Indian? Is this an Indian cow, or
Well, let's
Actually,
get back for a moment to our story. Our story is that we started as a single cell 3.5 billion years ago, and we divided by mitosis, and it was appropriate then to love ourselves, egotistical love. And then as we became to differentiate and have offspring, it became appropriate to add another kind of love, which we called filial love or parental love. We love now our offspring. And then as we went through our history, became closer to the present, we developed groups of families. We developed families of families, which we call tribes. So then it became a part, not only appropriate, but essential that you become part of a tribe. If you were a red ant, you couldn't travel with the black ants because you would be cannibalized, and so on. It was become natural as part of our history. And now we've come to the point where we have tribes of tribes. Our world is becoming one now. We're becoming interconnected like one. And we go to the next level of not tribal love, but the next level would be universal love. So if we follow this progression from our past to the present, we started out with egotistical love. We then went on to parental love. That's added to it. We didn't get rid of egotistical love. We still love ourselves, but now we love our offspring, our children. And then we went to tribal love. So we love our children, we love our family, and we love our tribe. And now what's happening in the course or the progress of evolution where we're becoming tribes of tribes, and we're becoming interconnected. We're becoming one connected world. but we're still caught up with tribal love. We're still caught up with egotistical, parental, and tribal love, and one other kind of love, which we just didn't mention yet, that is, we said in our history when the sexes were divided into different genders, then we added erotic love. That is, we inherited this DNA pattern in us that we're sort of directed, or we're told that when we reach a certain age, it's part of our mission, it's part of our responsibility to reproduce. We're not developing by mitosis anymore. It's our obligation to find a mate and to create new life. And the different sexes, although we're more alike than different, there is a difference, a small difference, but it's a big difference. And that is the male is given all these seed to run around inseminating the female energy, and the female is given this kind of responsibility, different than the male, to accept the seed and to seek a seed to be attractive, as we see the dog, who secretes a certain odor that attracts all the males, and the males run after the female, and then the seed is received, and then what has to happen then is the female energy is obligated for a period of time to nurture that seed, and then to pretty much has the DNA instinct to carry that seed forth with until the seed is ready to be old enough to reproduce itself. In the human language, this means probably till the child becomes of age, at least 12 or 13, and for the most part, till 18 or 19 or 20, to be able to go out on their own. So there are differences, and those are differences, but still there's more similarities than differences. Now, if we look at our history again, we started out with a very primitive situation, and we become more and more complex. So the example I think that for example, that Josephine brings up is that, yes, we did come to a time when we had lots of gods, and there was usually one senior god, but that's very late in our history. Before that, there was no senior god. When we were in the mitosis stage and the early stages, the idea of a single god among many gods was a very late stage in 3.5 billion years of development. And then later on that stage, we came to the idea, at least some of us came to the idea, that there was one God, and that one God, of course, is the senior God. And there's a story of the senior God who is, of course, the jealous God, and who spends. And if there's a jealous God, there's the devil, the other person who's the antagonist. So there's got to be some kind of conflict or battle going on. So there's a progression, and now we've come to the idea of an even more contemporary idea, which was, if you think about it, is Einstein's idea, and Barbara Mark Zuckerberg and these other people who are saying, we've got God all wrong. Our idea is God, there's nature. There's a group that's saying, forget about this magical feature. What really is true is there's something that we call the law of orderliness and predictability. And if anything, we could say that is God. God is the law of orderliness and predictability. It is the one law that all of us must obey. We created the 10 Commandments that many people can break. All these, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet the other person's spouse, and so on. All these laws we break regularly. The one law that Einstein was saying, the law of orderliness and predictability, the law of cause and effect, is the law that none of us could break. That is the one law. Edison, he tried 3,000 different things before he found that tungsten was the one thing that you can make a light bulb with. And once they found that, now we use tungsten all the time. We don't use the other 3,000 things that he found that didn't work. But once we found what did work, the law of orderliness and predictability, so we're progressing, and we're not far along. So we still have a long way to go. There's more that we don't know than we do know. And what we believe in is everybody's religion. Everybody has religions, but the religion that we've been taught is a top-down religion. Think about it. It's not basically a religion of choice. It's one that is one of let's say, what's the word? It's a religion that is a top-down religion. It says there is a one right way, it's our way. And then now we're talking about that maybe we have to have a bottom-up religion where we bring our creativity together. And now we are the creators. What's different about us, goes back to Einstein again, what makes us different than all other species is that we are creators. You know, we create, and what Einstein was saying, because of the way we think, we create what we are now. You know, we have the choice not just to accept what nature brought us, is what our nurture taught us. We have the choice of introducing new words that say that we have the ability. So I've introduced the word, for example, mentogynous is not in our language, to exogenous or endogenous. There's outside influencers, exogenous, endogenous, inside, like our genes. And now we have a new word, mentogynous. We create with our own mind. So by the way we think, we are the ones who create our world now. We are creators. We create bombs now. We create our form of government. We create pollution. We create our diseases in many ways. Pretty much the things that we're talking about that are our dangers. We create most of the things that we find are dangerous. Starvation, global warming. These are not something that just automatically happen. Apparently, we've been given this special ability because of our use of language. And so I want to just, in my comments, say last week I sent everybody a new essay that has a list of about close to 100 new words or language words. So we've talked about 7 words before that say essentially change the way we think very rapidly. I allow, I could, and either or, getting rid of either or and adding both and. So by just changing these 7 words, we change the way we think and we assume our power that way. When I say I allow and I could, instead of blaming other people, we're saying I am responsible for me and what happens. That's the importance of those 7 simple words. And I think Sharad was saying maybe we ought to next time talk about the mental response control panel. What are the 8 choices we have in our willpower?
Yep.
And we just went through those once. But the point I'm trying to make is that until we change our language to word switches, and we stay stuck in our old language, tribal words or trigger words, words that trigger what we did in the past, which in the past was appropriate. In the past, it was appropriate to be at war with one another. We had to be a part of a tribe. We had to think that our tribe was the only right way, because otherwise we couldn't survive as an individual. Unless we were part of our tribe, it would be a matter of time before we would be extinguished. That is, we would be obsolete. And now we have the ability, and how do we do that? We do that by inventing new words that are words that are word switches that enable us to transfer our behavior from our animal brain, our robotic brain, with trigger words, to our human brain, or what we said is our Genie organ. What makes us different from every other species is we have this organ that can use imagination, that can make mistakes in our mind. And when we make those mistakes, we're not penalized anymore. So we make wrong errors, we decide, but as long as we don't drop the bomb, we're not in trouble. As long as we think about dropping the bomb, it's not a problem. As long as we think about dropping the bomb, or we imagine, or we create this false idea that we, as in Hawaii, that we're under an attack, when we realize that in our imagination, we don't have any difficulty. If the bomb were real, it'd be all over for all of us. We wouldn't be here anymore. So I know this gets to be a little complex, but I'm trying to convey to you, until to recognize that we change some of our language, we're going to continue to resist new ideas. We are comfortable in our old way of thinking. And our old way of thinking is my way is the only right way. And a lot of our discussion here, if you think about it, is my way is the only right way. And can we begin to say, what are our alternative possibilities? And I don't think we have the answer yet. But I think we have the ability, the group process like this, to create the answer. And I think we're doing it. I think we're well along the way. I think at least my observation is we're beginning to think more about not just the present, not just about looking about the present, but when we understand our history, we understand that the truck before it was a Ferrari, or before it was a bus, or before it was something else, it was just something with four wheels. It was probably a wheelbarrow with two wheels. And before that, it was a horse with four legs. And before that, it was no legs. It had no consciousness. So our history is we are evolving from having no conscious, no awareness, no stories, to now we have some primitive stories, and we're beginning to get more accurate stories of the law of orderliness and predictability, of the scientific method of who we really are. And so I know that's my passion is trying to put some of this together, and I hope you'll give a little thought to it. And what I'm simply asking you is that will you look over these word switches that I've sent over, almost 100 word switches. We've only talked about 7 of them, really. And those 7 are very powerful. When we say, I think, instead of I'm allowing myself my thoughts, instead of listening to my old brain and what it tells me I should do to be safe, now we're thinking. And when we say I allow and I could, and when we use both and instead of either or, we're beginning to look at ourselves as our connectivity rather than our differences. We're focusing on something different. So I simply ask you or plead to you, will you look over these word switches and see if they make a difference? So I've had my rant and my rave here, and thank you for being so patient and saying, I wish the guy would shut up so I can speak. So at any rate, please share your last thoughts and we'll end our meeting.
It's almost 11 o'clock, so.
Yeah. Any last thoughts here?
No, not for me. I think I said what I needed to say at the time throughout the course of the meeting.
Okay, so my last thought would just simply be, please look over the essay that I've sent you, especially the story of evolution. If you just read that, it's only a few pages, the story of evolution. Our history is so important to understand where we've been and where we're coming from and where we are today. Most of us do not have an accurate history of our past. And also take a look, if you will, at these 4 or 5 or 6 pages of word switches that replace trigger words. That when we realize that we are victims of the language that our ancestors have created, these tribal words and other kinds of words that cause us to think in terms of either or, right or wrong, good or bad. And that's not the way the world is. The world is, it's a both and world. We love and hate. We love the people that will care for us, and we hate those things that, disease, we hate death, we hate a lot of things. So we have love and hate. It's not love or hate. So let's end our meeting now. We'll go into our business meeting. Thank you. I think we're making some headway here from my point of view. I hope you agree with me. And I hope you'll give it a little thought. I mean, these are getting into some deep ideas that we usually don't think much about. We're usually thinking about how we can make more money today and how we can be more beautiful and how we can, these are our religion. We do worship the golden cow. We worship money. We worship power. That's why we create more weapons. And we worship things that are the symbols of power, which basically are money in today's world. Okay, well, thank you. And
thank you. Bye-bye.